Okay, so in the beginning of the movie Troy, Hector chases down Achilles and meets up to him, catches up to him in the temple of Apollo on the beach of Troy. And Hector pursues Achilles into the temple, and Achilles is hiding in the temple and won't come out to fight. So in the beginning of the movie, Hector faces Achilles to fight him, and Achilles won't do it. And the reason why I won't do it is apparent that Achilles wants to tell Hector a message so he can go back and tell the rest of the Trojans a message, which is, why kill you today? I could kill you tomorrow. Go be with your wife, and I'll kill you tomorrow. Basically, that's what supposedly in the movie Achilles told Hector, why kill you today, Prince of Troy, when I could kill you tomorrow? And that was the kind of reasoning behind why Achilles wouldn't do it. But let me tell you something. If Hector had fought Achilles, he would have beat him. And in the Temple of Apollo, he wouldn't have lost, which meant that the first time they almost faced off, Hector was in a righteous position where he would have beat Achilles. It's also why Achilles didn't come out to fight. So understand that Achilles knew that first encounter with Hector, he knew he'd better not try to do anything like come out and fight. Because Hector was in the Temple of Apollo, which was his god. And ultimately, at a complete advantage, Achilles was in the temple of the god Apollo, and he had just sacked it and killed people in it, the priests in it. So basically, like, the god Apollo was saying, you're in my temple, buddy, and I'm gonna hurt you. So basically, Achilles hid in the temple in the shadows, knowing he was in the temple of Apollo and he had just destroyed it. And ultimately, he also was going to face off Hector, who was in a righteous position under the protection of his god in the temple and ready to fight. And so ultimately, Achilles wasn't dumb. He said, why kill you today, Prince of Troy? I'll kill you tomorrow. And ultimately, that was just his way of saying, I don't want to die today either. The truth behind why Hector died in the fight with Achilles was truly, there's much more to it. Hector was much better of a fighter than you might think, and ultimately he was as good as Achilles. And ultimately in the movie it portrays Hector's not as good, or Achilles was much better. Let me tell you something, Hector was as good as Achilles, but when Hector had a chance to fight him the first time, the goddesses dismayed Achilles to come out and fight because they said, you might lose. Hector's a legend in his own time. Hector is a god of Mars and the first Prince of Troy, also to be in line as the King of Troy. Hector is a great man and a great fighter, as good as Achilles is. And so ultimately, how did Hector lose so badly then? Because the goddesses wanted to put Hector in a position to have to fight Achilles when he was at an extreme disadvantage. And so they would have to get Hector to come out to fight Achilles when Achilles had the advantage. And so it couldn't be in the temple of his god because that gave Hector the advantage. Hector had to fight Achilles in the field, and it had to be on the field that Achilles was on. So it was Achilles' field. So the field of battle was owned by Achilles, and ultimately it was Hector's too. But Hector agreed to come out and fight because the goddesses pressured him to do it. They said, you have to do it. Now, why did he have to do it? Why did he feel pressured to have to do it? I'll tell you why. Because Hector accidentally killed the cousin of Achilles, who was a boy. So he was young. So basically, Patroclus was the best friend of Achilles. And Patroclus put on Achilles' armor and pretended to be Achilles. Patroclus, who was the best friend of Achilles, and the only man that Achilles actually loved and cared about, because Achilles didn't care about anybody in the world. He hated everybody. But Patroclus was his companion, and he's the only guy in the world he loved. So Achilles only loved one man in the world, and it was his friend Patroclus. And Patroclus and him were so close, and he taught him how to fight. So Patroclus could fight like Achilles, but unfortunately, he was not as good as Achilles by any means, even though it appeared to be so. Because truly, Achilles taught Patroclus how to fight, and so Patroclus really thought he could do and fight like Achilles, and Achilles let Patroclus put his armor on and go out and fight the Trojans. And so Patroclus loved the idea that he could put the armor of Achilles on and go out and fight him, and they're going to think that Patroclus is Achilles. Patroclus loved it. So the Trojans would they'd run from Patroclus when they saw Achilles coming, but it was Patroclus coming, not Achilles. And Patroclus just loved bluffing him and psyching him out. So ultimately, when Hector lost the fight to Achilles, it was only because of the murder of Patroclus. Hector felt guilty for killing a boy who he thought was Achilles, who was actually his companion and a boy, not a man almost. But Hector felt guilty of killing him. He also didn't want to kill him. He thought he was killing Achilles. And it turned out when he pulled the helmet off, it was his companion Patroclus who's put his armor on and pretended to be Achilles. And Hector was devastated. He thought, oh my God, I just thought I beat Achilles, the greatest legend fighter ever lived. And it turns out I thought I just killed him, and I just found out it's his best friend Patroclus who I killed, who's just a boy. Yeah. So he was disappointed because he not only failed to kill Achilles, but he killed his one and only companion whom he loved. So he completely screwed up. Meaning there's only one man in the world that Achilles cared about. It was his friend Patroclus. Achilles didn't have any feelings for any man or anyone except Patroclus was the only one he liked, his buddy. So ultimately, what happened? What did Hector do? He killed the one man in the world that Achilles actually cared about. There was only one man that Achilles actually cared about. It was Patroclus, which meant that it was a guilt trip on Hector's heart. Oh my gosh, he only loves one guy, and I just killed him. So basically, Hector felt guilty and also regretted the fact that he not only did he fail to kill his enemy, but he actually killed a kid who was pretending to be Achilles, Patroclus. And so that was a trick, because when Hector went home, he felt defeated. Even though he won that battle, he actually murdered some kid who was pretending to be Achilles. And Achilles was so pissed. Achilles was so angry and enraged that he went after Hector and said, Hector. And ultimately Hector said, oh my gosh, this is not good. And the goddesses told Hector, you better go out and man up. And Hector was like, I don't know what to do. But I'll tell you what, if Hector hadn't accidentally killed Patroclus, thinking it was Achilles, he would have not went out there to fight Achilles, or if he did, he would have won, not lost. So why did Hector lose the fight with Achilles? Because he killed Patroclus by accident and felt terrible about it. And understand it was a big drain on his entire being. So understand, it also enraged Achilles beyond anything. Achilles wanted vengeance, and Hector felt terrible of what he'd done. Understand that how Hector felt about what he'd done, making the mistake of murdering a child that was wearing the armor of his archenemy, who, wasn't Achilles actually. Hector was so bummed out. I thought I killed Achilles, but it wasn't even Achilles, and now I still got to fight him. And he went and agreed to go out there because the goddesses said, Hector, you got to go out there and face him. And Hector would have said, no, I don't. Why should I have to face him? I don't have to face him. Understand, Hector said, okay, I do have to go face him. Why did he think he did? Because the goddesses wanted Hector to feel guilty and bad about what he'd done. He did, regretful too. And then they completely told Hector, the goddesses were saying, like, Hector, you screwed up. There's only one man, you just killed the kid. And ultimately Hector's like, I didn't know. I thought it was Achilles. Ultimately they got Hector to completely be disturbed emotionally about it, what he'd done. And so by the time he had to go fight Achilles, and Achilles came to Hector and said, fight me, like, come out. Ultimately, Hector was so emotionally disturbed about what happened that he felt obligated to have to go face Achilles and own up to whatever the mistake was. I killed your only friend. I'm sorry, but now we have to fight. Understand, because of the conditions behind Hector fighting him in these conditions, Hector lost the fight. He lost his spirit. Hector lost his powerful Mars spirit because of the accidental killing of Patroclus. And understand, it was a plan of the goddesses to fool Hector out of himself so that he would lose the fight. Because understand, Hector would not have lost the fight. If Hector had gone out to face Achilles and hadn't killed his best friend by accident, Hector would have went out there and said, Achilles, you done sacked the temple of Apollo, my God. and I'm gonna hurt you, boy. And ultimately, Achilles would have said, yeah, but you're not psyched out. How am I gonna beat you? Well, Hector said, you're not gonna beat me. But ultimately, because Hector felt guilty and regretful, it's an edge they placed on Hector, which completely just threw him for a loop. You know what? When you're disturbed emotionally or affected psychologically by a mistake you've made, which is a big mistake you've made, the effects it has on you and your reaction to a realization of the mistakes you've made, it's just a feeling that says, oh, I screwed up, or I'm regretful. Understand, it was the feeling and the exact thing that destroyed Hector, or his ability to fight Achilles and win. It's why he lost so quickly and easily, because Hector felt utterly guilty of murdering the only one companion of Achilles, which he didn't want to do, and also regretted the fact that he thought he'd killed Achilles and he didn't do it, which meant Hector was in such a disappointing emotional state of mind by the time he went out to fight Achilles. Achilles was mad, energized, and pissed off with a vengeance, and the goddesses were supporting Achilles, and they had psyched Hector into a position of mentality which was more like a boy. So Hector went from being a man of men to kind of a defeated man who was more like a boy feeling picked on by the goddesses after they tricked him into killing Patroclus so that he could feel guilty about it, regretful about it, and then feel responsible for having to go out there to face Achilles after the goddesses told him, you better do it, Hector, if you have any honor. And ultimately he's like, damn, I have to go face Achilles now? Yeah, if you have any honor, you killed his companion, go face him. Ultimately he said, okay, I'll do it. I'm gonna tell you something. He should have said, no, I'm not gonna do it. I don't have to do it. I'm not gonna go out there and feel guilty, and I can't fight that good. My spirit's gone. I lost the god I have. I feel bad. Well, don't go out there and fight him then. Stay inside the damn Troy walls. And ultimately, if the goddesses hadn't effectively tricked him into dying by losing the fight, he would not have lost it.